February 19th, 1943. Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. The air itself is a razor. A bitter wind whips down from the Atlas Mountains, carrying the grit of the desert and the stench of burnt steel. For Obergefreiter Klaus Richter, a 21-year-old Panzer Grenadier of the 10th Panzer Division, this wind is the sound of the world ending. He lies pressed against the cold, unforgiving rock of Jebel El Hamra, his Kar 98K rifle a useless weight in his numb fingers. The rhythmic, terrifying crunch of tank treads, not the familiar growl of a Panzer IV, but the higher-pitched mechanical grind of an American M4 Sherman is getting closer. For days, the propaganda officers had assured them of victory. They had spoken of the Americans as soft, decadent amateurs. Jazz-playing cowboys, Lieutenant Hauser had scoffed. They will break at the first taste of real war. And for a while, they had. The initial German assault had torn through the inexperienced American lines like a buzzsaw. But now, the tide has turned with an industrial fury Klaus could never have imagined. The sky, once owned by the Stukas and Messerschmitts of the Luftwaffe, is now a hunting ground for P-38 Lightnings that strafe their positions with impunity. The artillery is constant, a rolling drumbeat of death that pulverizes the landscape and the nerves. Klaus risks a glance over his cover. Down the slope, the wreckage of a SD Kfz 251 half-track, his ride to this particular hell, burns with a greasy black smoke. His squad is gone. Weber, the machine gunner with the picture of his sweetheart from Cologne, lies 20 feet away, a still and silent shape. The rest, he doesn't know. He is alone, his ammunition is nearly spent, and the water in his canteen tastes of metal and despair. The American GIs are moving up the ridge, methodical and relentless. He can hear their strange, flat accents carrying on the wind. Everything he has been taught screams at him. Surrender is dishonor. Capture by the Americans is a fate worse than death. The political commissars in training had shown them cartoons, grotesque caricatures of gangster-like Americans torturing noble German soldiers. They were savages, they'd said, who would take his gold fillings and leave him to starve in a cage. He clutches the worn grip of his rifle, his mind a maelstrom of fear and duty. A quick death here, fighting to the last, is the hero's end. But then, a shell screams overhead and impacts just behind his position, showering him with dirt and stone fragments. The concussion rings in his ears, a deafening metallic tone that blanks out all other sound. His body is trembling uncontrollably. He is not a hero from a newsreel. He is a boy from a small village near the Rhine who wants to live. He sees them now. 3 of them, moving low, their M1 Garands held at the ready. They don't look like gangsters. They look young, tired, and just as frightened as he is. Their faces are smudged with dirt, their olive-drab uniforms torn and dusty. One of them spots him. The muzzle of the Garand swings toward him. Time seems to stop. This is it, the moment of decision. The commissar's warnings echo in his mind. They will kill you without mercy. Slowly, fighting every instinct, every fiber of his indoctrination, Klaus lays his rifle down on the rocky ground. He raises his hands, palms open, shaking. He half expects the sharp crack of the rifle, the impact that will end it all. Instead, one of the soldiers yells something he doesn't understand. The tone is not bloodthirsty, but weary, an order. He is pulled to his feet, his arms roughly searched. He sees hundreds of others, a long, shuffling column of men in dusty Feldgrau being herded down the mountain. The great Afrika Korps, the invincible desert army, is broken. As he is marched toward a collection point, he avoids eye contact with his captors, his heart hammering against his ribs. He is a prisoner. His war is over. But a new, more terrifying one is about to begin. Or so he thinks. They are loaded onto trucks, then trains, packed tight like cattle, heading for the coast. The journey is a blur of hunger and uncertainty. Finally, he stands on the docks of Oran, staring at a vast gray Liberty ship that will carry him across the ocean to the land of his enemies. As he feels the rumble of the ship's engines and watches the shores of Africa disappear, a single, cold thought grips him. He is sailing towards a monster, and he will never see home again. The journey across the Atlantic is 3 weeks of purgatory. Klaus and 2,000 other German prisoners are packed into the cavernous holds of the transport ship. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, diesel fumes, and vomit. For the first week, as the ship pitches and rolls in the heavy seas, the men are racked with seasickness. They lie in their tiered bunks, miserable, subsisting on hard biscuits and a thin, greasy soup. Whispers circulate in the dim, humid darkness. Stories of U-boats hunting their own, accidentally sending their comrades to the bottom. Every creak of the hull, every distant clang sends a fresh wave of anxiety through the hold. But slowly, something strange begins to happen. The American guards are not the brutes from the propaganda posters. They are disciplined, detached, and efficient. When a fight breaks out over a piece of bread, they don't beat the men responsible. They separate them. When dysentery sweeps through one of the holds, American medics in white coats appear with sulfa drugs and clean water. One day, a prisoner collapses from a burst appendix. He is carried away, and the Germans assume they will never see him again. 2 days later, he returns, pale and sore, but alive. He speaks in hushed, awestruck tones of a clean, white infirmary, a surgeon, and anesthesia. It is the first crack in the foundation of their fear. Then comes the food. After the first week, it improves. They are served white bread, a luxury not seen in Germany for years. There is real coffee with sugar, tins of fruit, and meat in the stew. It is simple, mass-produced fare, but to men accustomed to the meager ersatz rations of the Wehrmacht, it is a feast. They begin to gain weight. The hollows in their cheeks fill out. The constant gnawing hunger that was their companion in the desert begins to recede. Finally, they arrive. They are herded onto the deck, squinting in the bright sun. Before them is not a landscape of military fortifications, but the colossal, sprawling port of Norfolk, Virginia. Cranes swing massive cargo containers as if they were toys. The harbor is choked with ships, and beyond it, the city gleams. Klaus stares, his mind struggling to process the scene. There are no bomb craters, no skeletal burned-out buildings, no ration queues. The streets are filled with brightly colored automobiles, more than he has ever seen in his life. The Americans walk with an easy, confident stride. The women wear colorful dresses and lipstick. It is a nation untouched by the war that has consumed his entire world. The real shock comes during the train journey south. The prisoners are loaded into passenger cars, not cattle wagons, and as the train clicks and clacks its way across Virginia, the Carolinas, and into the deep south, Klaus is pressed against the window, mesmerized. He sees endless rolling fields of green, tidy farmhouses with white picket fences, and small towns where children play in the streets. At a crossing, he watches a family in a Ford sedan wait for the train to pass. The father is smoking a pipe, the mother smiles, and a little girl in the back waves at the train. They don't look like monsters. They look normal. The train finally shudders to a halt in the flat, sun-baked landscape of East Texas. The heat hits them like a physical blow as they disembark. In front of them, surrounded by barbed wire and watchtowers, is their destination, Camp Hearn. Klaus braces himself for the grim reality of a prison camp. He expects squalid barracks, mud, and misery. Instead, he sees rows of neatly painted wooden buildings laid out on a grid of streets. There are recreation fields, a library, and even a theater. It looks less like a prison and more like a small, orderly town. An American officer, a captain whose uniform is crisp and clean despite the oppressive heat, addresses them through a translator. "You are prisoners of war under the Articles of the Geneva Convention," he announces, his voice calm and professional. "You will work, you will be paid for your labor, and you will obey the rules. Welcome to Camp Hearn." Klaus looks at the faces of his comrades. He sees not fear, but a profound, staggering confusion. They have been trained to fight and die in a world of fire, blood, and hatred. They have been delivered instead to this clean, quiet, and utterly bewildering place. The hell they were promised has turned out to be a meticulously organized compound in the middle of Texas, where the sun beats down and the biggest immediate threat seems to be boredom. As the gates clang shut behind him, Klaus feels a sense of dislocation so profound it makes him dizzy. He has left the war, but he has landed on a different planet. The daily routine at Camp Hearn settles into a rhythm that is both monotonous and surreal. The wake-up call is at 6, followed by roll call and breakfast. And what a breakfast it is! Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast with butter, and that miraculous American coffee, hot and strong. For Klaus, who had spent months subsisting on stale black bread and chicory water, it feels like a banquet. The sheer abundance of food is a constant topic of conversation, a source of endless disbelief. The prisoners are fed the same rations as the American soldiers guarding them, a policy dictated by the Geneva Convention that the Germans, at first, believed to be a trick. But the food is just the beginning. The camp is a self-contained world. The prisoners organize their own kitchens, workshops, and infirmaries. They build furniture, repair tools, and even landscape the grounds, planting flower beds and vegetable gardens. A camp university is established, with German officers, former professors and engineers in civilian life, teaching courses on everything from mathematics and literature to English. Klaus, whose formal education ended when he was drafted at 18, enrolls in an English class, painstakingly tracing the foreign words in a notebook provided by the Red Cross. The most transformative part of this new life, however, begins when he is assigned to a work detail outside the camp. Due to a wartime labor shortage, prisoners are contracted out to local farmers. Each morning, Klaus and 24 other men are loaded onto trucks and driven to nearby farms to help with the cotton harvest. The work is hard, back-breaking labor under the relentless Texas sun, but it comes with two astonishing revelations. First, they are paid. For each day's work, they earn 80 cents in camp scrip, which they can spend at the prisoner-run canteen. The canteen is a temple of forbidden capitalist delights. They can buy Coca-Cola, Lucky Strike cigarettes, candy bars, magazines, and even, on occasion, cold American beer. The simple act of earning money and choosing how to spend it is a revelation, a flicker of personal agency in a life that had been dictated by orders and survival. Second, and far more profound, is the contact with American civilians. Klaus is assigned to the Miller Farm, a sprawling cotton plantation owned by a weathered, quiet man in his late 50s. Mr. Miller treats the prisoners not with hostility, but with a kind of practical indifference. They are here to do a job, and as long as they do it well, he leaves them be. It is his wife, and particularly his 19-year-old daughter, Mary Beth, who chip away at Klaus's remaining defenses. Mrs. Miller brings them lemonade in the afternoons, a gesture of simple kindness that leaves the Germans speechless. Mary Beth, who sometimes helps in the fields, is curious. She asks Klaus questions about his home, his family. She helps him with his fledgling English, laughing good-naturedly at his thick accent. In her, Klaus sees no hatred. He sees no enemy. He sees a young woman not so different from the girls in his village. There is a cautious, unspoken friendship that develops between them, a fragile human connection across the vast divide of war and barbed wire. Some prisoners in other camps go further, striking up secret romances with local women, a phenomenon that causes a scandal in the American press, but highlights the bizarre intimacy of the program. Life inside the golden cage, as some prisoners began to call it, is better than anything Klaus has known for years. He has 3 square meals a day, a clean bed, meaningful work, and the opportunity to learn. He plays soccer on the camp's immaculate pitch, he acts in plays put on by the camp theater group, and he listens to American swing music on the radio. The war, the death, the mud of Tunisia, it all begins to feel like a fever dream. The Reich he fought for feels a million miles away. One sweltering afternoon in late 1944, after returning from the Miller farm, there is mail. A thin, heavily censored letter from his mother in Hamburg. His hands tremble as he opens it. The last letter he received was 6 months ago. He scans the familiar handwriting, and his blood runs cold. She writes not of victory or resilience, but of survival. She describes the fire nights, the Allied bombing raids that have turned the city into a sea of flame.
She talks about the food rations, the constant hunger, the freezing cold of their unheated apartment. She ends the letter with a sentence that the censor has almost, but not quite, blacked out. "Pray for us, Klaus. All is lost here." Klaus sits on his bunk, the letter clutched in his hand. The cheerful sounds of the camp, a harmonica playing, men laughing, fading into a dull roar in his ears. He looks around at the clean barracks, thinks of the steak dinner he ate the night before, and feels a profound and sickening sense of guilt. He is safe, he is well fed, he is living in a strange paradise, while his home, the country he was willing to die for, is being systematically burned to the ground. The golden cage has protected him from the war, but it has also locked him out of his own life, turning him into a spectator of his country's annihilation.
The news from Germany, arriving in censored letters and carefully selected American newsreels, turns the atmosphere inside Camp Hearn from one of surreal comfort to one of growing dread. Klaus's mother's letter is not an anomaly. It is the new reality. Every prisoner who receives mail reads a similar story of apocalypse. Cologne, Dresden, Berlin, great cities, once symbols of German strength, are now just names in a litany of destruction. The letters describe a nation on its knees, a civilian population starving and freezing in the ruins. The American authorities, as part of a carefully orchestrated re-education program, begin to show the prisoners newsreels of the advancing Allied fronts. The prisoners watch in stunned silence. They see endless columns of American tanks and trucks pouring across the Rhine. They see the bombed-out skeletons of factories that were supposed to be fueling the German war machine. They see haggard, boyish soldiers of the Volkssturm, the last desperate levy of the old and the young, being taken prisoner. The myth of Nazi invincibility, already cracked, now shatters completely. This new information splinters the prisoner population. A faction of hardcore, fanatical Nazis, mostly young officers and SS men held in separate compounds, refuse to believe it. They dismiss the newsreels as clever propaganda, the letters as forgeries. They maintain a rigid, secret command structure, holding kangaroo courts for those whose loyalty wavers. They whisper of wonder weapons, of a final, decisive battle that will turn the tide. They call men like Klaus traitors for learning English and being friendly with the Americans. Tensions run high. Fights break out. Men who openly question the Nazi ideology are ostracized, beaten, and in some rare, extreme cases, even murdered by their own comrades. Klaus finds himself caught in the middle. He avoids the fanatics, but he cannot escape the crushing weight of the truth. The Germany he knew is gone. The cause he fought for was built on a foundation of lies. The comfortable life in the camp now feels like a moral betrayal. He works on the Miller farm in a daze, the Texas sun and the endless rows of cotton a bizarre backdrop to the images of ruin that haunt his thoughts. Mary Beth senses his distress. "What's wrong, Klaus?" she asks one day, her voice gentle. He can't explain it to her. How can he describe the shame, the horror of realizing your entire world is a lie while living in the enemy's benevolent custody? Then, in April of 1945, the Americans show them a new set of films. These are not of battles or bombed cities. The camp projector flickers to life, and the images that appear on the screen are grainy, silent, and so monstrous they defy comprehension. They are from the newly liberated concentration camps, Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen, Dachau. The prisoners see skeletal figures in striped pajamas, staring with dead eyes. They see bulldozers pushing mountains of emaciated corpses into mass graves. A wave of revulsion and disbelief washes over the assembly hall. Some men shout that it's fake, a disgusting American trick. Others vomit where they sit. Many simply stare, their faces ashen masks of horror. Klaus feels a profound physical sickness. He had heard rumors, of course, whispers of camps for political enemies and Jews, but he, like most ordinary soldiers, had dismissed it as Allied propaganda. He had fought for the fatherland, for his people, to defend his home. He had not fought for this. This industrial-scale slaughter, this soulless barbarism, was a stain so deep it could never be washed away. The re-education program had, in one shocking hour, achieved its goal. For the vast majority of prisoners, any lingering loyalty to the Nazi regime evaporates in the face of such undeniable evil. The fanatics are silenced, isolated by the collective shame of their countrymen. The golden cage is no longer just a comfortable prison. It has become a moral sanctuary, a place to hide from the truth of what Germany had become. On May 8, 1945, the camp commander announces that the war in Europe is over. Germany has surrendered unconditionally. A strange, muted reaction ripples through the prisoners. There are no cheers for peace. There is no joy at the prospect of going home. Home is not the idyllic village by the Rhine that Klaus remembers. It is a wasteland haunted by ghosts and governed by foreign armies.
Going home means facing the ruins, the starvation, and the collective guilt for a crime so vast it is almost beyond understanding. The gates of the prison are about to open. But for Klaus and thousands like him, the idea of walking out into freedom has become the most terrifying prospect of all.
The end, when it comes, is an administrative process. The summer of 1945 is a flurry of paperwork, medical examinations, and repatriation schedules. The war is over, and the United States, with over 425,000 enemy prisoners on its soil, wants them gone. The American guards, once objects of fear, now seem like familiar faces, their attitudes shifting from professional detachment to a kind of weary sympathy. The unique, surreal world of the POW camp is being dismantled, and the prisoners must now confront the future they have dreaded for months. Panic begins to set in. The carefully constructed reality of the golden cage is dissolving. The prisoners are divided into groups based on their perceived political leanings. Ardent anti-Nazis are slated for early repatriation, intended to help rebuild a democratic Germany. The die-hard fanatics are held back, destined for a more rigorous denazification process in Europe. But for the vast majority, the ordinary soldiers like Klaus, the path is straightforward. They will be shipped back to a designated occupation zone. And this is where the begging begins. It starts as rumors, then becomes a daily spectacle. Prisoners approach the camp administrators, the translators, even the common GIs on guard duty. "Please, can I stay?" they ask, their new English hesitant but desperate. They offer to work for free, to join the U.S. Army, to do anything to avoid being sent back. An American sergeant, a man who fought his way through the hedgerows of Normandy, is accosted by a former German artilleryman. "In Germany there is nothing," the prisoner pleads, his eyes wide with fear. "No food, no house. My family, I don't know if they live. Here I have a bed, I have food. Let me stay." Klaus watches this desperation unfold, feeling the same cold knot of fear in his own stomach. His future is a terrifying blank. His home in Hamburg is in the British zone, but he has heard horror stories about the French zone, where German POWs are being used as forced labor to clear minefields, a near-certain death sentence. Even worse is the fate awaiting those from the Eastern territories, who will be handed over to the Soviet Union. The news from the Russian front was always terrifying, but the stories filtering back now speak of the Gulag, of starvation and being worked to death in Siberian mines. For thousands of German soldiers, returning to Europe means trading a comfortable American prison for a Soviet death camp. On his last day working at the Miller farm, Klaus says his goodbyes. Mr. Miller shakes his hand, a rare gesture of warmth. "Good luck, son," he says gruffly. Mary Beth gives him a small parcel containing a bar of soap, a new shirt, and a chocolate bar. "For the journey," she says, not meeting his eyes. The unspoken words hang in the hot Texas air between them. An impossible future, a friendship born of the strange circumstances of war, now ending as abruptly as it began. Back at camp, driven by a final, desperate impulse, Klaus requests to see the camp commander, Captain Miller, no relation to the farmer, a coincidence that feels like a cruel joke. He stands stiffly in the commander's office, the same office where he was processed 2 years earlier. "Sir," Klaus begins, his voice unsteady, "I request permission to remain in the United States. I will work on the farm. I can be a citizen. I do not want to go back." Captain Miller looks at him, his expression not unkind. He has heard this same plea 100 times in the last week. "Richter," he says, his voice tired, "I understand, but you have to understand my position. The Geneva Convention, which protected you here, is very clear. At the cessation of hostilities, prisoners of war shall be repatriated without delay. I don't have a choice. You don't have a choice." The finality in the captain's voice is absolute. There is no appeal. The rules that created this strange paradise also mandate its end. A week later, Klaus is on another train, this time heading east. He sees the same landscapes he saw on his arrival, but now they look differently. The tidy farms, the bustling towns, the endless green fields, they are no longer a strange new world, but a paradise being lost. The journey back across the Atlantic is the reverse of the first. The men are not scared, but sullen and despondent.
They are sailing not towards an unknown monster, but away from the only safety and stability they have known for years. As the ship steams out of New York Harbor, Klaus stands on the deck, watching the Statue of Liberty shrink against the horizon. He is free. He is no longer a prisoner. But he has never felt more captive, shackled to a future of ruin, shame, and uncertainty. The American POW program, a unique and controversial chapter of the war, had failed to make him love his own country, but it had succeeded in an even more profound way. It had shown him a different world, a different way to live. It had treated him not as a Nazi Superman or a subhuman beast, but as a man. And in doing so, it had given him something to eat, a place to sleep, and a reason to hope, only to snatch it all away at the very end, leaving him with the terrifying knowledge of exactly what he was going to lose.